It was supposed to be one of those quiet nights, the kind where you feel the world winding down alongside you. Dylan had been buzzing with excitement all day, demanding we visit his favorite fast food place after soccer practice. I figured, why not? It was late, but it wasn't anything out of the ordinary for us. We pulled into the parking lot, which was mostly empty, aside from a couple of cars near the entrance. I breathed a little easier, knowing we wouldn't have to deal with crowds. Inside, the atmosphere felt calm, if not a little stagnant. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly above, giving everything a sterile pale glow. The smell of fryer oil hung heavy in the air. Dylan dashed ahead, practically bouncing on his toes as he pointed to the play area near the back. I reminded him to stay close while I ordered our food. The cashier was a young guy, probably no older than 19, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I gave him a polite smile and placed our usual order: a kid's meal for Dylan and a chicken sandwich for me. While I waited, I scanned the room, letting my eyes wander. That's when I noticed the man. He was seated in the far corner by the window, almost hidden by the angle of the room. His posture was relaxed, legs crossed, one hand resting idly on the table. A cup of coffee steamed gently in front of him, untouched. He didn't look threatening. If anything, he seemed perfectly ordinary, like someone waiting for a friend or just killing time before heading home. His jacket was a bit rumpled and his hair needed a trim, but that was hardly unusual. I glanced away and tried to focus on Dylan, who was already scaling one of the play structures. He laughed and waved at me from behind the plastic window of a climbing tunnel, his face flushed with joy. I smiled back. The cashier handed me our tray, and I carried it over to a table near the play area. Dylan joined me, his cheeks still pink from exertion, and tore into his fries with gusto. As I sipped my soda, I caught myself glancing toward the corner again. The man hadn't moved. His coffee sat there, untouched, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the window, lost in thought. For some reason, I found myself wondering about him. Maybe he was waiting for someone who was running late, or maybe he was passing time before going home to an empty apartment. There was something about his stillness that felt oddly out of place in the restaurant's otherwise casual atmosphere, but it wasn't threatening, at least not yet. It was just odd. Dylan was still happily bouncing between the play area slides, his laughter echoing faintly through the restaurant, when the stranger spoke again. "You seem like a good mom," he said, his voice low but clear enough to carry across the space between us. I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden comment. He was looking directly at me now, his head tilted slightly to one side, as if studying me. "Thanks," I replied cautiously, forcing a polite smile. I turned my attention back to Dylan, hoping that would end the interaction, but it didn't. "You know, it's rare these days," he continued, leaning back in his chair. "Moms who actually spend time with their kids. Most of them are too busy on their phones or rushing off somewhere." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the weight behind them, the way his eyes seemed to linger a second too long. I nodded politely, but didn't respond, focusing instead on my soda, pretending I hadn't heard him. "Your son," he pressed on, his tone soft but insistent. "He's a lucky kid." "What's his name?" That did it. Every nerve in my body screamed to put an end to the conversation, but I didn't want to make a scene. I glanced at him, forcing my voice to stay even. "I'd rather not share that." His expression didn't change. If anything, he looked amused by my unease. "Fair enough," he said with a faint smile, raising his hands as if to say he meant no harm. "I didn't mean to pry. It's just, well, kids grow up so fast, don't they? You blink, and they're not little anymore." I nodded stiffly, pretending to check my phone to avoid his gaze. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through meaningless notifications, willing Dylan to finish playing so we could leave. The man leaned forward now, resting his arms on the table. "How old is he? 7? 8? "Look," I said, keeping my voice firm but measured. "I don't know you, and I don't see why we need to have this conversation." For a moment, he didn't respond. His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable, and the air between us felt heavy. Then, just as I was about to grab Dylan and leave, he shrugged and leaned back again, as if the exchange had been entirely ordinary. "No harm meant," he said lightly. "Just making conversation." But the damage was done. My pulse raced and my hands felt clammy. Dylan's laughter, once comforting, now sounded distant and muffled, like it belonged to someone else. "Dylan," I called sharply. He looked up from the slide, surprised by my tone. "Time to go." The ride home feels quiet, even though Dylan is busy talking about the games he plays in the restaurant's play area. I tried to listen, absorbing his innocent youth, but my thoughts kept coming back to the man. The way he stared, his unwanted questions, and the uncomfortable feeling I couldn't get rid of. When we turned into our home driveway, I felt relieved. The familiar streetlights provide a small sense of comfort, like finally getting out of a tight space. I brought Dylan in and locked the door quickly, trying to convince myself that I was exaggerating these worries too much. However, my calm only lasted a few minutes. After making sure Dylan was ready for bed, I stood in the living room, shadowing the window. Something prompted me to peek out. At first, there was nothing in sight. An empty street, just a faint beam of streetlights. But then I saw it. At the end of the road, just outside the scope of light, the man stood there. He doesn't move, does nothing, just stands like a statue. I felt my body freeze. I wanted to believe that it wasn't him, that I was hallucinating. But the way he stood, I knew it was him. I pulled the curtains quickly, hiding the scene from my view. I felt my heart beat fast, my hands trembling as I checked the door lock. That night, he remained there. The shadow of his body was occasionally visible from between the curtains, but he did not come close. He only watched. When morning comes and the sunlight begins to illuminate the streets, he disappears. I don't see it anymore. There was no trace or sign that he had ever been there. I tried to convince myself that it was all over, that he was just a weird guy with a disturbing fascination. However, the anxiety never completely disappeared. Every time I stand at the window, I feel like he can come back at any time. The moments in that restaurant kept repeating themselves in my mind. The way he talked, the way he looked at Dylan. Even though I never saw him again, his shadow still haunts me, like a trail in the corner of my mind, waiting to reappear.